you're making decisions within your organization, you're going to decide whether or not to make the decision as an individual or as a group. So how do you decide whether it is a group decision or an individual decision? Well, if you need it to be more accurate of a decision, then you should have it be done by a team, right? More people bringing insight and information to the issue. If it is a contentious issue where it will require buy-in from the rest of the organization, then you probably want a bigger group making those decisions, because the more people who are involved in the decision-making process, the more likely they are to be in agreement with or supportive with the solution. Or at least they'll know how the decision was made and what was considered in the process, which means they'll be more likely to buy in. If you need a creative solution, then the best way to go is in a group, because you'll have more people feeding off of each other, coming up with unique ideas. If the decision requires speed, then it is best to have it be an individual decision. If it is a program decision, remember we talked about those structured problems, and so structured problems have a process, have policies. We know what we can and can't do. And so program decisions tend to be made just by individuals. If the decision is one that will create conflict, you try to get a team to make a decision and all they do is fight among themselves, then you'll probably just better off having an individual, someone upper within the organization, a manager or a leader, to make that decision, somebody who is willing to make it, even though they know that it may lead to conflict. You really have to consider who is the source of the knowledge required to make the decision. Does it live within one or two people? Or do you need the knowledge of many people in order to make the decision? As you're looking at the size of your group, when you're looking at a group, think about having an odd number so that you can resolve issues, because the last thing you want is to have a team of 4 and 2 people feel one way and 2 people feel the other, and so the group cannot make a decision. So if we look at group size, some literature recommends that the group size be 3, so small but odd number, so that it can be quite responsive and nimble in its decision making and get the problem solved. As we said before, if you need more buy-in, you need more commitment to the decision by the greater group, then a bigger group is going to be more effective, in which case you're looking at a group that is 7 to 10 people in size, more people involved, more people understand how the decision was made, and more likely to implement the decision once it is made. So pros and cons of group decision making. So the advantage, of course, is we bring in people who have information. So now we have a bigger pool. And our group has different perspectives, different views, so we'll get different alternatives, different possible solutions, and we'll feed off of each other, so we create that intellectual stimulation and come up with probably new and better type solutions because of it. As we talked before, having that group, when you need buy-in, they will have a better understanding of the decision rationale. They're also more likely to see it as legitimate because it wasn't just one person up on high dictating to everybody else, but instead it was a team effort, a group effort. And of course, if it's a bigger group, then it will be seen as more reflective of all of the perspectives, all of the issues, seen as more legitimate. And then it means that there will be a deeper commitment in terms of people buying in and being willing to implement it. The downside, of course, to having groups make decisions is less efficient. We've probably all been on teams, whether that's in school or at work, and it takes a long time to get group consensus. We also have the risk that a few people will dominate the discussions, and so the decisions will reflect them and not everyone else, because there's this pressure to conform. We call this groupthink. We'll talk about groupthink in the next slide. The other challenge we have with decision-making by teams is because ultimately the responsibility for a solution rests with the team and not with the individual. it can be unclear what the individual's responsibilities or expectations are. And so you may just defer to the group rather than pushing forward for your contribution and your role in the decision. There's also risk with decision making by groups of satisficing, and we've talked about satisficing already, which is you just stop as soon as you get to a solution that is good enough, satisfactory. Okay. Oh, and I forgot to change this slide. This slide has an error in it. It shouldn't say group displacement. It should say goal displacement. And what I mean by that is the challenge with teams is that you go into the team has a goal to solve a particular problem. But that doesn't mean individuals have the same goal as the collective goal of the team. Maybe your goal going in and being on this team is to show everyone how knowledgeable you are. And so you are then, your goal there might be to outshine your rivals in terms of speaking, in terms of coming up with ideas. And so we have goal displacement, where the individual goals to make friends, to be seen as an authority, those kinds of goals can dominate the decision-making and the group work rather than the goal of coming up with a quality decision. So it says group displacement, but it should be goal displacement. All right, we brought up the pressure to conform to the groupthink. So let's flesh that out a little bit more. So the problem with groupthink, we just go with the group. We talked about cognitive bias in a previous video. So cognitive bias being that the particular cognitive bias we're looking at here is the bandwagon effect, right? So we go with it because everybody else is. That's groupthink. So what does it do? Well, it undermines critical thinking. We're not looking in detail at the problem, at the possible solutions. We're not being objective as we analyze those solutions. We are not considering out-of-the-box ones and maybe more unpopular ones because we'll just go with whatever the group goes with. So there's a tendency there of that satisficing because, you know, we're just going to go with the group. We're not pushing the group to think differently or to think about other alternatives. What causes this group think? Well, it's quite possible the people in the group have a sense of invulnerability. So we were tasked with coming up with a solution to this problem. We're the ultimate authority on this. And so there is that, as we looked at the cognitive biases, of that overconfidence. There's also can be this resistance to assumptions. That is, we come in thinking that we know better, and we take the information we have and our personal assumptions into the problem, and we're not considering the assumptions, the parameters being given to the team in terms of the decision. We have dominant members who pressure others, and we have people who don't like conflict, so they'd rather stay quiet. They don't want to create that conflict, so they don't speak out. Again, then we don't get that full critical, broader view of the issue and the solutions. The other thing we see is that as we have more group meetings that are virtual, so Zoom, Teams, it's very difficult in a virtual environment to have that full, just open discussion where everyone speaks up and provides opinions and perspectives, right? It takes a long time when you're doing it in the virtual environment. So when we have virtual meetings, we often assume that if no one is speaking up, they must all agree, right? There must be consensus. And so this can lead to that group think, just because we're like, well, I don't want to be the one who makes this meeting go on longer. We've heard enough people talk. You know, I'm sure that whatever they come up with will be good enough. So we tend to get that group think, that narrow view in terms of problem solving. So how do you deal with that? Well, we need to create and foster open discussion. So when you set up meetings with the team, how can you get everyone to put in their perspective and views? If you're the leader, then be an impartial leader. which is never give your opinion until everybody else has given theirs. To prevent that narrow view from your team, you can bring in outside experts to provide different experiences, different views, different recommendations. They're not as emotionally tied to how they're seen by the team. You can also encourage cohesion or trust within your team, so that they feel free to express opinions that others might reject. They're not afraid that they're going to be judged when they're making these decisions. Another thing you can do is you can create roles for people within your group so that they are more free to give gut reaction, to give more critical responses. One of the methods for doing this is what is called 6 thinking hats. So this comes from Edward de Bono. And those of you who are taking the Red Deer Polytechnic Business Topics and Skills course in our business degree will do some 6 thinking hats activities. But the idea here is that the people in the group play different roles, or your group goes through all the different roles together. So you then look at a problem in terms of objectivity and facts. You look at the gut reaction. You look at the positive. You look at the negative. You have an opportunity to be more creative. And so because we make sure that all these different perspectives are included, then we tend to have less group think, because we will get more broad solutions and we will thoroughly and critically investigate the solutions from both the emotional perspective as well as the fact-based perspective. We'll get to look at both the pros and cons of each potential solution. So you can more thoroughly investigate the issues and prevent that groupthink that reduces that critical thinking and objectivity.